Welcome to Homeschool University, where life meets learning. I'm Diana Applegate, and today I'm continuing my How to Homeschool series. That's right. Today we are talking about online coursework versus parent-led coursework. And how do you choose? How do you figure out what's going to be best for you and your students? When is online coursework best? Really? I mean, are there some guidelines that you can follow with that? When is parent-led coursework best? How do you figure that out? Yeah, I like her approach. Like, we need more stuff to think about, right? But hey, today I've got some easy tips to help you figure out what teaching approach is going to be best and when, right? So let's get started. Okay, so we're going to take a little segue here, and we're going to talk about something that's going to apply very deeply to what we're talking about really for our topic today. And that would be the difference between training and education. This is super important, and you need to understand it. That's why we're going to take this little moment to talk about it. So learning has two components. One would be training, the other would be education. Okay, those are two sides to the same thing, which would be learning. Now let's define these real quick. The definition of training would be practical skills needed to do an activity or a task. That is to say, learning to do something, okay? The definition of education, on the other hand, would be the development of the special and general abilities of the mind. That one translates into learning to think, okay? So we're going to do a little compare and contrast exercise for you to really nail this down in a practical way. But I just need to give a little shout out of appreciation to two resources that have really fine-tuned how I think about this. The first is a Marine Corps Doctrine publication. That's right, MCDP 7. Which is the first doctrinal publication that the Marine Corps has put out in about 20 years. It was put out in February of this year. Its whole title is Learning. It is all about learning and how to make that more effective. My other shout out goes to a guy named Jocko Willink, who does the Jocko podcast. Podcast number 227 dives into not just this publication, but just the topic in general. And I am really indebted to these two resources for really helping me think about this. So let me grab my little cheat card here so I can remember all this stuff. Okay, training. Training is preparing for known factors, for what you know about that's going to happen. Education would be preparing for the unknown. How do I make this work for what I don't even know that's coming? Training, teaching all the components, all little pieces of something. Education, applying those components in a practical and useful way. Training, learning by doing. Education, intellectual study and reflection. Training equals skills. Education equals knowledge. Training equals application. How do I do this thing? Education equals adaptation. How do I make this work in any given situation? Training equals ability. Education equals problem solving. Training equals the ability to take action. Education equals the confidence to take action. So I hope that this has really fleshed out this idea, the difference between training and education, because now we're going to talk about how those affect the kind of coursework that we want to do. And we're going to start with those online classes. Online learning. Alrighty, we are going to talk about two sides of that because it can be either live or it can be interactive. By the way, just want you to understand, we're not talking about video assisted learning. There's a huge difference here. Video assisted would be like Matthew C. They have a videotape that the child watches their lesson on the video, and Steve Demme teaches it right, but then everything else is on the parent after that. Steve Demme doesn't have any interaction with the student or anything like that. So that's what I'm saying. We're just differentiating here. So back to that online learning, okay? We're going to talk about live first. Live online learning has direct teacher interaction during class time. Plus, you usually have access to the teacher after class time, outside of that, via email. That's a real common way to be able to discuss something with them. It includes group discussion. Okay, quite often, group discussion is actually a weighted portion of the child's grade for that course. They have to be participating during the online class time, during that live class time. Great example of this would be Veritas Press. They put out some really wonderful online live courses, and in fact, we're going to go take a look at a syllabus from one of their grammar level courses to help you understand exactly what is involved in a live online course. So here we're looking at a course syllabus for grammar level geography from Veritas Scholars Academy. This is pretty typical of what you're going to see for a live online class. This has got your course description. What are the children going to be doing? Includes usually a little note about homework. In this case, we'll average 1 to 2 hours per week. Then you get into things like course learning objectives. Exactly how is the instructor going to present the material? That's where you're going to find that. Scrolling down here. And this is interesting. Students will be given quarterly grades for both participation and attendance. 15% of the final grade is attributed to relevant class participation. Things like raising your hand, commenting regularly on the microphone, using the chat box. 5% of the final grade is attributed to class attendance, being present, being on time, being ready. That's important to know. A little farther down here, get into assignments and exams and how the evaluations and grading scale works. Okay, obviously this is not going to be super important at the grammar level, but if you're doing it in high school, this stuff really, really matters. They talk about things like weekly homework assignments and how quizzes and tests are to be administered, right? Then you scroll a little farther down and it gets you to a really important thing, and that is which texts you're going to need for this course. Yes, you are already paying for an online course, but you also get to pay for the texts that your child needs to complete the course. So that's an added course, an added cost, just keep it in mind. So that's a good example of a live online course. Okay, so now we're going to talk about interactive online courses. These are a little different. This is like a smart computer program is essentially what we're talking about here. It reminds me of Rosetta Stone. That's a good example of it. I love Rosetta Stone for foreign language. How does it teach foreign language? By being smart enough to figure out what you got right and what you got wrong, and then to adapt to that, okay? Now, all of your child's coursework is right there on the computer. All of the materials are on the computer. The child actually does all of their work right there online, okay? But instead of having a teacher, it's just this interactive smart computer program, okay? So I just wanted to point out that's the difference between the two. They are both online learning. Now, here's a generalization about online learning. It is going to be your most expensive homeschool option. It is, trust me. A live online class can be $800 easy, and that's for a semester, okay? An interactive program is going to be a little less, maybe a couple $100, because obviously you don't have a teacher involved in all that. But this is just going to be an expensive option. Why? Because you're outsourcing the teaching. Somebody else is doing it, so you get to pay for that. On the upside, though, this is the option that has the least amount of parent prep, right? I mean, what do you have to do for an online course? Let's see. Get your child seated in front of the computer at the appropriate moment. That's it. That's the whole extent of the parent participation, pretty much, most of the time. There might be a little more that you do, but it's low prep, okay? Now, what kind of learning is an online course best for? Training. In a nutshell, it's best for training. It's best for skills-based learning, okay? Things like a foreign language or math, art, grammar, anything that has a finite set of rules that you need to learn to be proficient in whatever that topic is, okay? Now, why do I say online's best for training as opposed to maybe best for education? That's pretty simple. Kids' brains are not linear. They are more like a big plate of spaghetti and everything's just kind of all messed up and wiggled around in there, right? So kids' brains do not always connect the dots in things, in reasoning and thinking skills at the moment that something's being presented to them, right? So like in an online course, the major time for them to really mull something over is going to be while it's being presented. Sure, they can think about it for a few days and all of a sudden have that aha moment, but it's not going to have as much weight, or it's not going to be as helpful to them because that teacher isn't there for them to bounce it off of. And obviously they can bounce it off of you, but it's probably not going to be the same because you didn't sit through their coursework. You don't really know where they're at. So just saying, online courses are really best for those skills-based topics, those subjects, things that are best for training in that aspect of learning. So now let's move on to parent-led coursework. Parent-led learning is really, obviously, parent-centered, right? I mean, it's you, the parent, doing all the work here pretty much. You are teaching with the aid of maybe a teacher's manual. Maybe you have a video to assist you, like in my Matthew C. example that I just gave. Or maybe even you have personal knowledge of whatever you're teaching, and that's what you're communicating. But you're still doing the work, right? Now, the huge upside of parent-led teaching is that it is completely individualized instruction. That's right. Whereas online is kind of still a one-size-fits-all kind of education model, this is really tailored to your child because you know your child better than anyone else, and you know how best to present materials to them so that they will get it. And you also know if they got it or not. That's huge, okay? Now, downside, this is going to be your most time-consuming option. That's exactly right. This one, you've got to do the planning, you've got to do the teaching. You're the all-around guy for this, right? You're doing it all. But the upside is you have the lowest costs. That's right. All you're paying for are the materials that you need to teach with. So maybe that teacher's manual, that video, and the student books. That's it. That's going to keep your costs down way low. So there's a trade-off there, right? Now, what is the best method for parent-led learning? What is the best kind of course? Well, that would be an educational course. That's right, a thought-based learning experience. That's what this is best for. Things like history, literature, writing, science, logic, any class where you know your child's going to need to connect lots of dots together and form then an entire rational thought out of it. And that's going to take some effort on the child's part as well as on the teacher's part to make sure that all those little pieces come together, right? This is really great for anything that would need the child to form an opinion and then be able to also apply that, what they know and their opinion, to whatever new information they're presented with. So just saying, really, this is your educational model right here, parent-led learning. Now, let's take a minute and just kind of summarize this whole thing. So in summary, got a few closing thoughts here, right? The first thing that we just want to keep totally on the radar is online learning is best for training, that is to say skills-based learning, whereas parent-led classes are best for education, which would be thought-based learning, right? Now, when I say that, I'm going to throw this in. Obviously, either approach can be used for any subject. Oh, it can. And sometimes it boils down to, do you have more time or do you have more money, right? Depending on which way you want to go. But I personally, I'm just going to throw this out, I personally prefer to do parent-led classes. The reason why I prefer them is actually pretty simple. You get to be there for all their aha moments. There's a huge plus, right? You're at the core of them connecting all those dots together, and that is a really cool journey. But also, parent-led classes, you can really easily do either training or education. Both sides of learning are right there in your hands. Online course, it's much harder to go that next dimension to education. It's much easier to do skills-based learning, which would be training. So I'm just saying, in my opinion, Parent-led teaching is way more flexible and just more productive. But again, that's my opinion. You've been presented with both sides. Now you get to decide. So that's it for today. That's right. Thank you so much for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, hey, give it a like and please subscribe, right? Or actually, subscribe. Actually, it goes in both places, but I think it's on the other side of the screen. I don't know. Anyway, I am trying to get my message out to as many people as I can because I believe that every parent can homeschool and that it really is the greatest educational opportunity for any child. And all it takes is just a little empowerment. All it takes is a little guidance, and that's what I'm here for. So hopefully I'm doing my job in helping you with your homeschool journey. So join me here next Wednesday for my next video, which will actually be one that's a little different. This one's going to be travel with kids, but doing it the homeschool way. That's right. I'm actually going to be on the road next week with my husband. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to just talk about some travel tips. And I'm talking about doing it the homeschool way, which is way cooler than handheld games, gaming devices, and 1,000 videotapes. Just saying, tune in for that one, okay? So remember, here at Homeschool University, we have 3 key values. The first is to be practical. That's right. When you're talking about online versus parent-led, hey, which one's going to work for you based on practicality? That could be a major consideration. The next value is to be purposeful. Pray with and for your kids and for your homeschool. And the last one is my favorite, and that is to be positive. You know what? Positive is just a mindset, and you can do it, homeschool mom, because you are amazing.
Hey now, take a step outside and seize the day.